All right, I want to welcome everyone to the Rental Licensing Lunch and Learn webinar series. We are performing these here for the Planning and Code Administration Department with our Neighborhood Service Division. This is going to be basically a technical review of different codes that we bring into you during this series and just kind of give everyone just maybe a better aspect of what you might be required as far as property maintenance code, or as today's topic goes, for what requires a permit. I want everyone to know that this is not a full comprehensive review. What we're doing is we're covering like the most common scenarios that we've come across or the typical questions that we get asked. Always consult with our office if you have any types of questions. Don't use this webinar as a guide for what an office person might be able to answer questions for. We just wanted to kind of give you just a better understanding and just give you our thoughts on maybe what would help people guide through a process. To ask any questions at the bottom of the screen or wherever your Q&A button may be located on what device you're viewing from, certainly just tap or click on it, type in your question as we're going along, and we will answer them as time allows towards the end. And today we're going to be walked through the technical aspects of things by Jason Babb. Jason is going to be your expert for today. Jason is certified as a property maintenance inspector, and Jason is actually licensed through the state of Maryland as a home inspector. So Jason can give you a lot of perspectives on today's topic. And today's topic is going to be, doing upgrades, what requires a permit. I'm going to start our slideshow here, so bear with me while I share our screen. And before I turn things over to Jason, I'm going to just give you a couple other tips here. I want everyone to realize that every property is unique and that each situation is different. So it is always best to talk with one of the city inspectors here, whether or not it's with the neighborhood services team, whether or not it's with some of our permits or trade inspectors, or with anyone here in the Office for Planning and Code Administration. They're going to be able to guide you the best for that, because each situation can be different and each property is unique, which makes every town great, but we do have those issues that we come across that maybe doesn't go across the board blanket for everyone. I just want everyone to remember that, not every situation requires a permit, but every situation should be discussed with one of our inspectors. This webinar is really going to be used for residential units. Commercial properties and commercial units have a different guidelines and rules for what requires a permit. So this is really to only be used for residential units. And then you might be thinking, as we're going along through the webinar, Jason might mention something of what doesn't require a permit, and you're thinking, well, the city told me to get a permit for that. Like I said before, each situation is different. So there might be something that requires a permit that didn't previously. So you should always have a conversation with our office to make sure you know if a permit is required or not. And now I'm going to turn things over to Jason, and he's going to cover things as far as the building, plumbing, electrical, and mechanical. What type of upgrades would require a permit? Jason?
Thank you, Paul. My name is Jason. Again, we're going over doing upgrades and what requires a permit. We're going to start with the building permits. One, who can obtain a building permit? A property owner or a licensed contractor can obtain a building permit. If the property is one or two family dwelling, then the contractor must be MHIC licensed. If the property is 3 or more units, the contractor must be a city licensed contractor. A couple examples, adding a closet. A single family home, not typically, but if this is a multifamily, the inspector would have to meet with you on site to discuss if one is needed. With multifamily homes, we must ensure the fire separations are not being compromised. We also have to ensure the egress paths are not being changed or altered by adding the closet. Now, as far as adding walls, any wall being added or closing off a doorway does require a permit. This is mainly for the egress paths. We need to verify egress paths have not been drastically changed to affect the egress out of the structure. The same is true for closing off a doorway. A permit is required for this alteration. as far as adding a room, whether it be bedroom, bathroom, den, etc. When creating any type of habitable room, a building permit is required for this work. The same as if the safe space is going from a non-habitable space to habitable, a permit is required to create that habitable space. Now, along the lines of new carpet, paint, tiling, flooring, or cabinetry, no permit is required for carpet, paint, or new flooring. Cabinetry will depend on the situation. If you're replacing the cabinetry and putting kind of back in the same place, no alterations, then no permit is required. Now, as far as if you are rearranging the layout of the kitchen, so forth, changing the way it is, then yes, a permit is required. Now, as far as stair treads, replacing stair treads, no permit is required to replace a stair tread. Now, as far as the stairs, when it comes to the stringers, replacing a stair stringer, yes, a permit is required. This work will need a permit. Because this is a structural component and must have a permit replacing the stair stringer. If your thoughts are to like sistering a stringer or any other joist, rafter, thinking the permit is not required, your thoughts could be inaccurate due to if you are sistering a structural component that is deteriorated to the point it cannot support imposed loads or there are associated failures due to deterioration, sistering will not be sufficient to meet the code. Replacement must occur and a permit is then also required. Now, replacing what was there. We hear this often, I just replaced what was there. It does not mean no permit is required. There are several existing items that require permits when they are being replaced. Always please consult with our office before replacing an item that was already in existence. Now, next, replacing decking. The deck boards for a porch or deck do not require a permit. If you have to replace a joist, or as we previously mentioned, need considered sistering something due to deterioration, then a permit will be required for the joist replacement. There is no code for sistering, joist, rafters, or any other item in construction. These are considered engineered designs when something is sistered. Now, replacing porch posts. Yes, a building permit is required to replace porch posts. This is a structural component of a system and building permit will be required. Now, as far as handrails, guardrails, no permit is required for replacement of the handrails or guardrails. They are to be compliant with the code. So the spacing on the guards cannot be more than 4 inches and the handrails cannot just be a standard 2x4. They are a code requirement for these items. So please be sure to ask the inspector what meets the code as far as diameter of the rail, end to end, it all comes into play. Now, as far as plumbing, your plumbing permits, who can obtain the permits? Only a city licensed plumber can obtain plumbing permits for rental properties. All plumbing work is to be performed by a licensed plumber, even if plumbing permit is not required. We expect everything to be done by code and we require licensed contractors. Now, replacing a fixture, toilets, sink, kitchen sink, they all, if a new fixture going in the same location, no modification to the water supply, to the sewer lines, then no permit is required. The only exception is a tub. We do require a permit for the replacement of a tub. That is the difference in the fixtures. If modifications are needed to the supply or drain lines, then a permit is required for any of them. You know, although the permit may not be required, you still must be compliant with the currently adopted code for new installations. This includes whether S-traps must be a P-trap when it comes to plumbing. All must meet code whether needing a permit or not. If you're installing a new fixture in a new location, then yes, plumbing permits are required. Replacing supply and drain lines. Yes, again, a plumbing permit is required for replacing any of the drain lines, no matter if they are exposed, excuse me, or concealed by walls or floors. Now, replacing a trap, you are not required to have a permit for replacing the trap as long as it is this unscrew type. You can unscrew it and replace it without interfering with any glue pipe or replacing any permanent pipe. Now, as far as valve replacement, again, a plumbing permit is required for valve replacement in this system. This is to ensure the valve is installed correctly and can function as designed. Moving on to water heating. Now, replacing a water heater, again, a permit is required for replacing any water heater. This is a pressure vessel and must be installed by a licensed plumber due to safety concerns. Replacing or adding an expansion tank, yes, this too requires a plumbing permit. The city of Hagerstown installed check valves that are all our water meters, and every water heater is to have an expansion tank with it. Now, as far as refrigerators with an ice maker, if a new water line is needed to connect the refrigerator, then yes, a plumbing permit is required for the work. If you are connecting to an existing line that is already existing and no additions have to be made, then no permit is required for that installation. Moving on to gas lines. Now, adding a gas line for a furnace, a stove, or water heater, yes, a plumbing permit is required. It is a flammable gas that is being piped into the structure. This must be done by a licensed professional. The first inspection of that would be formed as a pressure test on the line to ensure that no leaks or there are no leaks. Then we perform a final inspection once the gas-fired equipment is connected to the gas line. Also remember, if you have a gas into your house, you also are required also to have CO protection as well. So remember, everything that you can affect something else as far as code or safety. So piping in gas to a home for any type of appliance, you then must consider the safety issue as far as CO protection as well. If you desire to remove an oil tank from your property, any unused oil from the structure, a plumbing permit is required for this work. The oil tank is to be properly disposed of in a safe manner. Also, NDA tracks this information, and we are required to report this activity to them. Now, moving on to electrical. Who can attain electrical permit? Only city licensed electricians can obtain electrical permits. All electrical work performed on a property is to be done by a licensed electrician, even if a permit is not required. Along those lines, knob and tube. Get asked if knob and tube is allowed. Yes, there is no code against knob and tube wiring. Many times this is an assurance situation, but not in violation of code to have the wiring. Now, if the wiring has to be taped or damaged, then this is when issues exist. An electrical permit will be required to make these repairs to the knob and tube. Now, as far as electrical outlets or receptacles, replacing them, no permit is required or needed to replace an existing outlet or receptacle. This replace could be if there's something stuck in the ground or you just want to change the color of the device, no permit is required. Changing an existing outlet receptacle to a ground fault or a GFCI device, still, again, no permit is required to replace that existing GFCI device. If an outlet does not exist in place and you need a GFCI, then a permit is required. But if the outlet is existing, no permit is required. I would add to that, please be aware of GFCIs. They can be hooked up and they can work just fine, but not properly protect downline devices. So please, it's very important for an electrician to also to handle that, to understand it. Now, now grounding an outlet receptacle. Yes, an electrical permit is required for grounding an outlet receptacle. Anytime a device needs grounded, the licensed professional is to ensure the ground is from the device to the proper ground, and this will be examined during the inspection. Now, as far as outlets adding to a countertop, yes, again, this is new being added, not existing. Electrical permit is required for that countertop installation. Replacing a breaker. Replacing a breaker does not require a permit to replace the breaker. If you're changing a breaker to a GFCI breaker for a bathroom circuit, still again, no permit is required for this replacement of a breaker. Now, next is adding a junction box. This is a situational answer. Typically, no permit is required to add a junction box or to add a cover to an existing junction box. All junctions are to be properly secured within a junction box. If this situation is hazardous, then a permit may be required for this work. Please work with the inspector on determining if this is an electrical permit needed for this type of work. Now, outlets over a baseboard heater. Now, this is a common issue in Hagerstown. No outlet is permitted above an electrical baseboard heater. The electrical wire for the item being plugged into the wall will be within close proximity or touching the heater, which can melt and cause a fire. There are a couple of scenarios with this. First, is there enough slack in the electrical line for the heater to be shifted? If yes, then no permit is required. Electrical wire needs to be added to the heater, then electrical permit is required. Next, can the outlet just be blanked off or removed? Not really. The outlet could be blanked off, but the number of outlets cannot be reduced in a room. Even though the minimum number of outlets per property maintenance code is 2 outlets, the number of outlets in a room must be maintained. We will say this is a case-by-case basis. There are scenarios where the outlet could be blanked off. This again is where we ask you to discuss this with the inspector when wanting to blank off the outlet to become compliant. Now, moving to hardwire smoke alarms in wrong locations. Now, moving electrical powered smoke alarm without adding wire does not require a permit. If the alarm was too far down on a wall and needed to be moved, there's a chance that there's enough slack in that line to move the smoke alarm to the proper location. That would not require a permit. But now adding a hardwire electric smoke alarm to a system requires electrical permit. Something is being added to your system and additional to the electrical circuit. Again, that permits, you need a permit for that. Now, as far as emergency cutoff switches, if you need an emergency cutoff switch, a permit is required for this installation because the switches to ensure the equipment shut off in an emergency situation, and an inspection of the work is required. Now, mechanical. As far as mechanical, who can obtain mechanical permits? A Maryland licensed HVAC contractor can obtain mechanical permits for a non-owner occupied structure. Now, replacing the HVAC system, a push-pull type replacement, yes, a mechanical permit is required for the work. Even though everything is the same, a mechanical permit is still required. Now, if you're replacing an exhaust fan, this one can fall under a mechanical or electrical requirement. for a permit possibly need to be pulled. If you're replacing the existing exhaust fan in the same location, then no permit is required for this work. If it is a new location, then yes, a permit is required for the work. Which type of permit is up to the trade inspector, because if the exhaust vent run is short, then you may only need an electrical permit. Whereas if the venting is long, then an electrical permit and mechanical permit may be required for the installation of the new exhaust fan. Now, as far as in the kitchen with a kitchen hood, replacing an existing kitchen hood and not moving its location, then no permit is required for that. If the kitchen is being rearranged, like we talked about cabinets or what have you, then a mechanical permit is required for the hood and must be exhausted through the exterior of the property. Again, permit is required again for that, for any new type of rearrangement for that. Changing venting. Venting on the appliance, yes, a mechanical permit is required when the venting of any mechanical equipment is being changed. If done incorrectly, we have the chance of the backdrafting of carbon monoxide fumes, which will, it won't be properly vented from the structure, and again, causing a life safety issue. Now, in summary, we only covered some of the common scenarios that we have come across. Whenever there is a question, if a permit is required, please contact our office. We greatly appreciate it. The communication is best. We'd rather catch it now and discuss it with you instead of finding out later, which can cause a headache for both parties and additional monies as well. Each situation is different, and it depends on several factors. If a permit is required or not required. So at this time, thank you for the time. I'm going to pass this back to Paul, and there you go, Paul.
All right, thanks, Jason. Jason covered a lot of things here during what requires a permit and what does not, and he took a great time to explain each of them. I know we didn't get into the details of each reason of why one was required, but believe me that we've gone through a review committee 2 years ago that we explored each of these items and what required a permit and what did not. We had presentations to the mayor and council, and this is where everything settled at 2 years ago for determination of what does. And like we always say, Hagerstown is a very unique town, and each property is different that we come across. So please just always remember, don't take this as a guide for when a permit is not required. I mean, it can certainly help you in understanding things, but if you have a question and it wasn't something specifically answered in this webinar, please just always contact our office so that we can answer those questions. Our goal through this webinar is to kind of give you some basic knowledge and some general knowledge about the code and when items are required to have a permit. Now, if you have a specific question about your particular property, you can certainly email that to us at codecompliance@hagerstownmd.org, that we can answer those for you. Right now, we'll kind of open things up. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here because I can't see everything on my computer at the same time. And I'm going to kind of, while we kind of wait for some questions to come in, I'm going to ask a couple questions. I know the presentation that Jason gave to us today was a lot of like Q&A almost already. It was already, he was kind of saying, does this require a permit? And then kind of giving you an answer from that. So kind of saying, do we have other additional questions? But I like to give a little bit of time for anyone to type them in if they were thinking about it. The one thing that I'll point out, though, before I start with those questions to Jason, I don't know if anyone paid attention that's watching to saw that some of the text was different colors as you went along through the webinar. You saw ones that were in white, you saw some that were in yellow, and you saw some that were in blue. And there was a reason behind that. The white ones were telling you that, yes, a permit is required for that work. The yellow was telling you that, no, a permit is not required for that work. And then the blue was saying, basically, it's situational. There could be a permit required or not. Now, I want everyone to know also that, everything that we listed today, was not always saying all permits were required. So just for a quick recap on numbers, that we have the items that we mentioned today, 17 of them do require a permit for them. So that's something that we've come across in the past where people haven't gotten them. We just want to make sure you understand that. But there were 11 items that did not require a permit, and there were also 5 that it may be situational where you may or may not require a permit. So certainly always reach out to our office to get clear answers to those questions. While we have a couple questions keep on coming in here, I'm going to ask Jason a couple. So Jason, we have a light fixture that I want to change into a ceiling fan because I just it's hot. I like to have the fan blow on me. Is a permit required for me just to swap out an existing light fixture and put a ceiling fan in its place?
Just for changing out to go from the light fixture to a fan, no permit is required just for that. There's nothing being added. But you do have to make sure when doing that, of course, you're going to have whether it can be supported by the fan box, if that is capable of doing that, or have to place one in. Now, also, but the main thing is you really have to be aware of when putting a fan in itself, you may not need a permit, but it may affect any other codes. For instance, a lot of times you will find smoke detectors that are close to a light fixture, but then placing a fan in its place now then puts you in violation of the code for smoke detectors against fans, where they have to be spaced out approximately 3 feet from the tip of the fan. So by placing that fan there, you now are in violation of another code that you are to be compliant. And in that situation, a safety concern.
No, that's a good point. So always call, to get the answer to that question. Also, what about, I'm replacing outlets that have existing wiring. I'm just, swapping an outlet out for another one because it was brown before and I want it to be white because I want to change how the look is done. You said it didn't require a permit, but when I'm reviewing the code, I see different things of when outlets are being replaced, they're supposed to be arc fault protected. Could you explain that? Because if a permit isn't required, then with the arc fault protection, what does all that mean?
Meaning replacing the outlet itself, physically replacing it, it does not require the permit. But again, like everything, it still has to meet the code, the present code. And right now that would require arc fault protection. We still do require by code everything to be worked on by a licensed contractor, electrical contractor. Even though the permit will not need to be pulled, we still require it does need to be up to code, and that would require an arc fault.
Okay. And then one of the more common ones that we get questions about is that I want to replace the doors or windows to my house. Do I need a permit to replace doors and windows?
As far as just one for one replacing, whether it be a door or a window, a permit is not required. Now, when you get into, if you were to make it smaller, decrease in size, the window or the door, then you can get into where if you're affecting the framework or what have you, because if making something smaller can then put you against a code, violate a code for like egress. That's the main thing, like egress or anything like that. Now, as far as doors, like you're affecting the wall. If you're going into the wall situation, changing the wall, having to widen it, make it longer, you're adding or taking away from a structure that you would want to speak with an inspector to talk about what your plans are and if or not that's going to require a permit. Now, one thing we'll bring up, if you're in the historic district, all your work for this like exterior work windows, whether or not it needs a permit or not, you are required to do the HDC for approval for any kind of this work. Even though, like I said, even if the permit is not required, you still need approval for the HDC. Like I said, enlarging or window or anything like that, your building permit will be required for this work.
Okay, great. Good point about the Historic District Commission. Even though permits may not be required for different things, we do have to make sure that our historic buildings are keeping that historic character with them. We've had a couple questions that have come in here, and We did talk about interior painting, but is a permit required to paint the exterior of the property?
No, just painting your exterior, whether it be your wood siding, trim, what have you. Just the standard painting of your home property does not require a permit.
Okay, and then also, what about an exterior awning? Does that require a permit? I guess if you want to talk about maybe existing ones, and then also if I was doing a new one.
Any new awning, whatever you'll want to get with the inspector, they are required for permitting.
Okay, and then like an existing one, I guess I'll pick it up from there. That if it was just like one of those awnings over windows or anything along those lines, or if you're looking at one like those and throwing out names as we're live here and stuff, sunsetter awnings or something like that, then no, none of those require a permit. But if you're looking to put something over a sidewalk or a brand new awning on a structure, then yeah, you're looking for a permit. And then one of the other questions we have, and Jason, I can take this one, is where can I find a list of licensed electricians for the city? That is something actually on our website. If you go to www.hagerstowncode.org, and on the left-hand side, you'll see city licensed contractors. You can click on that side of the page there, and we list all the city licensed contractors that can do work on 3 or more family homes. We also list all the city licensed contractors for electrical and plumbing. And we update those lists pretty much every 6 months or so, because people can go on and off the list depending on if they renew or not. For example, our electricians licenses are being renewed at the end of this year. So some people might not renew that are currently on that list. But it lists everyone that's licensed with the city of Hagerstown as far as a contractor for 3 or more families, electrical and plumbing. We do have links then to the Maryland Department of Labor, which you might remember it as DLLR because it used to be Department of Labor License and Regulations, but they changed their name a couple years ago. So it's just Department of Labor now. But it is a link that you can go and search for anyone that's MHIC licensed or has an HVAC license. Just on their site there alone, just looking up any contractors. You can search by location. If you're looking for just one in Hagerstown, you can just type in Hagerstown and it will list everyone that's currently licensed in that. So that looks like the majority of the questions that we got to, and we try to keep these short, but sometimes when we're getting to these technical aspects of things, it can kind of go on a little bit longer than expected. But I want to thank everyone for being part of this webinar series. Please be sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. You can search for PCAD Hagerstown. That's PCAD Hagerstown. And you can look us up that way. We give a lot of different tips on different things as far as energy efficiency and safety requirements. We're putting those out on a weekly basis right now as we get into the colder months, just for everyone to be safer. And we also provide other useful things for everyone to be aware of in Hagerstown. Again, I thank you for everyone participating today. Please be sure to sign up for our next webinar that will be Friday next week, which I believe is the 30th. And we will be covering overcrowding and how is that calculated. And until then, we'll see everyone at that time. And again, I thank you all for participating in today's event.